we are here today to review Era Medieval Age, and in this case the expansion with it, the Rivers and Roads expansion. This recently released, I believe it was in 2021 or 2020?
The expansion, yeah. It was just this year.
Yeah, the Era we picked up at Gen Con, the 2019, the last year. Gen Con was alive and well. So if you want to follow along with our reviews, we try to crank them out pretty regularly, about almost every day. We get one out. But if you hit the subscribe button, follow along with our adventures. We're going to go through our entire collection, both of our collections, really.
Get the notification bell. I'll let you know whenever we do get those new ones out, and we welcome any comments.
Yep. And we also take recommendations. So if you have any games that you recommend, we'll be happy to try to get them up here. So as far as the quality of these components, first of all, this is while it looks like a game that's got components and pieces and everything that you actually play, this is actually a roll and write. You play Yahtzee with the dice. Roll and build. But this in essence is your writing.
Right.
You're rolling a set of dice that you get, and that gives you resources. You can get whammies, if you will, skulls that come up that if you get those, you have lock those dice, and you have to take the penalty that you get associated with those, which is sometimes a penalty that hurts other players. And then we go through several phases, which we'll get to in gameplay. As far as the quality components, these little buildings are beautiful. The only thing that make them better is if they were painted. I've seen some people actually paint these, and they look amazing. But
even then, it's still, you can't ask for better components.
Yeah, and thematically, the colors are important as far as the functionality. So you wouldn't want to paint them to the point where you couldn't tell what the colors of the buildings are. But they look amazing.
There's only one huge negative side effect to the components, and that's the player boards.
Yeah.
If they weren't painted, which Randy's Dragon Mother did.
Not painted. She took a marker.
Well, but still, the idea that she marked them up, painted them somehow to kind of differentiate the different resource columns and the turn tracker. Yeah. If it wasn't for that, it's very difficult to see which resources applies to what
This was a Kickstarter release version. Right. Afterwards, because of all the complaints, they put stickers in, but I still prefer what we've done as far... I mean, it's a little bit... It still rubs off a little. Ink's not 100% dry ever, but it works pretty well.
It's still a lot better, but that's the only, in my opinion, the only complaint this entire game.
Well, the player board, I mean, screens are a little...
They are, but I'm fine with it because they look pretty. And so...
Yeah, but one, they're supposed to, the first round, hide your build of your map. There's no way that's going to do that. But more importantly is that they just are very flimsy and fall. The initial set didn't give you any... This is part of the expansion that gives you these cards. It's kind of like a catalog of what you can buy, which is kind of neat. In the other one, you just had the rule book and like a cheat sheet rule book for some of the little mini expansions, which was okay, but it was kind of a nuisance to have to keep looking things up as far as their functionality. So I actually like these cards that they've added.
I do too. I think the cards really added a lot to it. But I mean, even though the board is a big negative, the buildings themselves is a huge positive.
Yeah, and the dice are pretty good.
Yeah, they're etched, so you don't have to worry about them rubbing off. Yeah,
they're all custom. They've just gone really high end on everything with this game.
They really did.
I'm gonna have to give this a 9. I think it's a top notch quality.
I'm gonna go a little bit higher at 9.5. I'd give it a 10 if I like the player boards. If the player boards were a little bit better, then it'd be a perfect 10.
Okay. As far as theme, I mean, it's a medieval building of your city. There's
and it feels like, because the buildings look medieval. I mean, even though they're not painted, but I mean, just by the art, the style of the building themselves, they do look.
They do, and then also just the functionality of the dice, the penalties like the plague or the diseases and the different things that can spread. I mean, that's really cool. Fires and all the such, the disasters, I think they call them. That's really neat.
And the expansion adds flooding.
Yes,
which is kind of cool.
Expansion has flooding. We haven't got there yet.
Yeah, we haven't got there yet.
The expansion, it works. It's a little strange because it basically tries to ease you into the additional.
Yeah, it's kind of it's not quite legacy, not quite campaign. Because there's not enough there to really call it a campaign, but it does kind of like Maracaibo with Alexander Pfister.
Yeah.
Kind of eases you into some of the later aspects of the gameplay.
So in the end, you have the big game, which is basically everything. So that's basically the direction they're taking you with its baby steps, so you get used to the new buildings. So thematic, I mean, there's not much story here, but it flows through the mechanics of the game very well.
And the art's really good too. The art on the cards is nice. It matches the buildings perfectly. But then the little background art that they have in black and white, I think, is really neat. And the art for the box is fantastic. The art in the rule book is really good. Your player aids, the art's really nice. I mean, thematically, I think it really knocks it out.
Yeah, I think thematically, I would agree. I'm going to go ahead and give this an 8, just because I think they've done a good job integrating it with the gameplay. But apart from that, it's not like it's overwhelming in theme. It's
right. It's kind of hard. I'm thinking 8.5, just because I think the art is so nice. If it did have more of a story, it would definitely be a much higher score.
All right, so moving on to the rule book. Well, we've got 2 rule books now, because the base game had 1, but I'm going to talk more about the expansion.
Yeah.
The base game was pretty good as far as the rules go into explaining everything.
Yeah, we didn't have a hard time.
The expansion's a little weird, because the expansion, it explains like the different scenarios you've got and kind of how to set them up. But there's not a lot of good explanations on some of the buildings. I mean, like, we ran into an issue, and nobody's asked the question yet, but with like one of the buildings is the armory, whereas most everything up until now has affected past phases in the round.
Right. It was clear that the effect of the building didn't happen until the next time. Round. But the armory kind of was a monkey wrench.
It affects like a future phase. Yeah. So when you build it, can you actually alter that round? And no one has even asked the question on Board Game Geek.
Right.
It seems like it would have been an obvious question. Maybe there's an FAQ out there. We just haven't found it yet. But it's missing stuff like that should be in the rules. And and it's set up clearly just driving you through the releasing of these scenarios. There's really no detail as far as an expansion goes in here. It's kind of a weird book. So as far as the base game rules, I'm going to give that one an 8. It's pretty well done. It's got a lot of art. As far as this new expansion one, I want to give it a 6. I'm not happy with the way it's done.
I do have the expansion. I just haven't looked through it yet. I've combined everything into one box, but I haven't read it yet. So I'll take your word on it.
Yeah. All right. So as for gameplay, the gameplay on this is really simple. It's a very interesting game. You start out with 3 townhouses? Yeah, 3 townhouses.
Not townhouses, longhouses.
Longhouses, okay. And a farm.
And a farm.
And then...
which would give you 4 dice. And a keep.
Yeah, and a keep.
Which gives you 4 dice.
And it's 3 walls, sections of 4 length. And you can arrange them however you want in your territory.
It's supposed to be hidden.
But the keep gives you a gray die. And the longhouses give you yellow dice for each one. So you end up with 4 dice, 3 yellow and 1 gray. These will produce resources for you for the first round. You also start with some base resources, for each category.
Basically, since you built the building, they give you that resource that it would normally give you.
So the categories, they have a trade good, which is the hardest one to get.
Right.
They have stone, wood, and then wheat, which is food.
Right.
And you have to feed your dice every round. So every die you have to have a food for it. The farms will actually produce food for you, but only 1 per. So you start the game out with 3 food and a farm. So your first round, you don't necessarily have to feed. Worry about getting food, but you're going to need it immediately after if you don't get food. So the thing is you're at the mercy of the dice, what you roll. So you're going to roll the dice up to 3 times, just like in Yahtzee. You get to decide which of the dice you're going to keep and which ones you're going to re-roll, unless you get a skull. If you get a skull, the die is locked, and you have to deal with the penalty for that later on. So there are a few dice that let you unlock dice, but it's not easy to unlock a skull once you've got it. So you roll the dice, you get your resources, you go ahead and collect your resources in the next phase, and you move up all your little dial or settings or markers for each one. They all have a cap on them though, so you can only hold so many. And your trade goods have the most limit. Your food goes all the way up to 10, which is also the limit of how many dice you can have. Because if you had more, you wouldn't be able to feed them.
Right.
Because you are capped at that 10, and then you feed from the 10. So 10 is the maximum number of dice. After you collect your resources, then you have to feed. And that's where you pay the food for each of your dice.
You can't feed them.
If you can't feed them, you take a loss of a victory point for each one.
That's a skull that you get marked on the skull, not on the die.
All right. Then it is disaster times. And this is where you evaluate how many skulls you've got, and they have a chart that shows you what disaster occurs depending on the dice. If you get odd numbers of them beyond like 3 or 5, then you actually can do things to the other players negatively, which is kind of
sucks.
Cool. Oh, it's a great feeling when you do it.
No, it's cool, but it sucks.
Yeah. So, like, if you roll really badly, just keep trying to roll badly, because hopefully you'll end up hurting the other players and not you. But it can be really devastating because it can burn down your buildings. Or it can launch a scorched earth onto other players, which will take up a 3x3
which is
space.
The part that sucks
on the grid. So you actually also start the game with one scorched earth.
That's true. You do.
So you'll have one no matter what to begin the game. So you're basically trying to build out your terrain in the most optimal way with the buildings that actually are going to score you the most points, because the buildings are all worth your victory points. Some of which have in-game bonuses on them. But they are the hardest to get, and they require trade goods. For the most part, I believe all of them do.
And the overall goal is to see if you can try and encircle all of your buildings within walls.
Right.
Because that's good for multiple reasons. One, if you get everything circled in, then the scorched earth isn't going to hurt you as badly, because it kind of prevents that. But also it scores double points for your buildings.
Yeah, everything inside the wall scores double. Anything outside the wall, regular points. And can still be susceptible to scorched earth.
That's correct.
If you don't have any space to put it open, you have to put it over a building. And you faced that a couple of times.
So I actually lost part of my wall and one of the new pieces, the gate, because I didn't have anywhere to put the scorched earth. So I had to, was able to destroy the wall and not destroy my points, the buildings that score me points. But because I did that, I wasn't able to complete my wall. Therefore, I wasn't able to double my points.
Yeah, but that doubling of points is huge.
It's very huge. I wasn't able to double my points, and I came into a pretty close second.
Yeah,
if I was able to double my, if I was able to encircle my buildings, it'd have been great.
Yeah, it's a challenge because you have to balance. Because the thing is there's limited walls. There's limited
very much
everything.
so, and they're kind of different sizes.
Yeah.
So there's the fewest amount of 4 length, and then you get more 3, and the most you get is 2, and there's a lot of 2s, but there's only a limited number even of those.
Yeah, I mean, it did help with the expansion because it added in the armory.
It did add a few more.
It added in the gates, which can help.
The gates, and you also get the keeps, which is in the base game, which is it's a 2x2 square, so that does help.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things is that you don't have to be exactly touching. It can be off just by little, as long as they connect.
Yeah, but diagonal does not count.
Right, but there are ways to kind of minimize the amount of walls you need to still keep it encircled.
The optimal, obviously, would be to build a wall that surrounds your entire area and making everything double. But it's more practical because, first of all, there's not enough walls for everybody at the table to do that.
Yeah.
Now, there might be with the expansion. We got close this time because Miranda had almost finished her entire wall.
Hers, and
I got
Randy did.
I got my wall finished, but I had a strip of 3x3 or 3x whatever.
Which is actually kind of smart because it gives you like fodder for your scorched earth.
Yeah. Well, it is. And I mean, if you can close it off, though, you won't get scorched earth. But, Miranda focused entirely on building the walls, and to her detriment because she didn't get any buildings inside to double.
Right.
Whereas I focused kind of on half and half, and I got a lot of nice buildings inside that doubled in value. And Dwight kind of cheated, but yeah, he got
right. And I scored a lot of mine off with just roads, which is one of the new parts and one of the new expansions. I got quite a few points off of that, and just kind of maximizing the buildings I had.
Yeah, but yeah, you managed to pull it off because you got a lot of the in-game bonus points.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a pretty tight game overall.
Pretty much.
So yeah, I mean. And then after that, you have the gray dice, which we didn't talk about, which these are the military dice.
Right.
So at the end of the round, your military are evaluated, and you compare how many swords you get, because there's swords and shields on them, And the swords will attack the other players. So if you have more swords than the other players do, or more shields, or more swords than their shields, then you get to steal a resource from them at the end of the round. And it evaluates you against every other player, and then it goes around the table. So you might be able to steal from all 3 players, or you might be able to steal from 1 player, or 2 people. So you got to evaluate each one, what the bounce, whether you bounce, because if you have the same number of swords or shields as the other player, then nothing happens.
Right.
So you evaluate that for each player, and so somebody might end up losing 3 resources going around the table.
And that's a big deal, because if you're losing resources that you really are trying to save up to get a really nice building in a later round, and then of course if you build something like a commodity, that's going to be the first thing the other people go for.
Yeah,
because trade goods, because that's the most valuable one and the hardest one to get.
Yeah, so as long as they're not capped. I mean, I was capped at it at one point. Unfortunately, I never had the stone to go with it, so I didn't get the cathedral, which is what I was targeting. So it's a really cool system that built out of this, and one of the disasters you have to consider right away is there's disease, where if your buildings are touching, you get a negative victory point for each one of the buildings that touches. So you got to be careful, because ideally you'd optimize space, but if you've got buildings touching, you're going to run risk of disease spreading rampant, which is really cool thematically.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So you want to space it out, which they've helped with the expansion. They added roads, which actually give you a reason to separate them. And it also gives you in-game bonus if you connect the roads, which is something we missed in the rules when we were starting out. But actually, she cheated still. She didn't touch the wall. So basically, you've got to optimally try to position your roads now such that they connect to as many buildings as possible, because your roads score based upon the number of buildings they touch. And
if it starts from the outside edge.
Yeah, well, it has to start from the outside edge.
So it's got it, and then as many buildings as they touch, you can score points off that.
Yeah. So it was a neat ad, I thought.
It's a really neat ad. So, I like the roads a lot.
Yeah,
I think it added a cool aspect.
I'm eager to see what the rivers add. We know that one of the things it does is it adds another option for disaster, which is flood.
Right.
And the flood will basically act like scorched earth, it sounds like, and taking up more spaces around the river. So it sounds like it's going to add some neat meandering as far as the play area, which would be cool to see. So I think it's just another game we need to delve more into to see what we're all going to get with this expansion. But as overall, this is just a fun.
It's a fun game.
I am not a huge roll and write fan. I like them all right, but they're not my favorite by any means. But this one I really enjoy.
I do too.
I like the tactile aspect of it. Instead of you're just marking a tick box, you're actually building something.
Yeah, it's chunky.
Yeah, and it makes a neat little design.
It's got awesome table presence.
Yeah, and I love the gates are really cool that they added.
I really like the gates. Yeah, because the concept of gates is you have to span over the river or the road, which we didn't really get that until the end of it.
We still don't know. It didn't.
It does. Really specify. It says span. It specifically says that. So I bet it has to.
It probably does have to, but again, it's something that should have been more clear in the rules.
What does span mean? It means it goes over. But either way, statistically, the Board Game Geek, the general rating is 7.3. Now, it is a pricey game because of all the different, let's call them minis that you get for it. $69.99 MSRP. Now, you can get it cheaper based off of whichever websites that you choose to go to. But $69.99 is the MSRP. It's designed by Matt Leacock, who's made some great games. Artist is Chris Quilliams, and it's published by Eggertspiel.
Yeah. So this is one of, if you're trying to decide on a roll and write, and
this is a great one to start with.
This is a great one. It is going to be pricier than a lot of the other roll and writes.
Yes, for sure.
And it doesn't look like a roll and write. So if you just go look at it, it's like, oh, that's not a roll and write. It is a roll and write.
And a lot of roll and writes are cheap. So they're like $20, $69, but look at what you get for your money. Yeah. And the fun factor is just way up there.
Yeah, and it's really, I think it's got a foundation in like the Roll Through the Ages. It's got a lot of the feel of that. If you've played Roll Through the Ages, it's got basically a very similar feel.
Yeah,
to it.
Absolutely.
But I prefer this vastly to Roll Through the Ages. It's just,
I like both, but I like this a lot.
Yeah. So as far as this for me, I'm probably going to give this a 9.5. As far as roll and rights go, it's one of my favorites.
I can't agree. I mean, I totally agree. I can't argue that. I think it deserves a 9.5. It's a great game.
Yeah. So yeah, check this one out.
Absolutely,
highly recommend. Any other thoughts on it?
No.
All right. Well then, until next time, we'll see you tomorrow. Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Actually, I don't know.
Well, tomorrow's game night.
So. Yeah, tomorrow's game
Tuesday,
night. So
all right.
Well, see you
See
next
ya.
time. Bye.